Good morning. Happy Tuesday. I was up. My alarm had a lot to do today. Just some coaching this morning. 4:45. It was or whatever, and it went off, and I peed, and then I said, "Stupid. Why am I getting a weekend? It's Sunday." And I reset the alarm for to bed. It is. Okay, hold on. Hold on. Hold up. Be patient. Is it better now? I can't figure out my own application. Oh my gosh. Is this any better? I accidentally logged into Safari instead of Chrome, and Chrome hates me. I mean, Safari hates me. All right, there we go. All right, so I switched over to Chrome. Okay, anyway, I reset my alarm for, I reset my alarm for 6:15 because I didn't need to be up that early on a weekend, and I went back to bed, and then when I woke up at 6:15, I was like, is it Sunday or is it Tuesday? It wasn't Sunday. So I didn't get what I needed to get done today, but that's all right. It'll get done later. Story of my life. All right. Let's go ahead and get started. October 11th, the faith of a Galilee woman. Mark 7:24 through 30. Then Jesus left Galilee and went north to the region of Tyre. He didn't want anyone to know which house he was staying in, but he couldn't keep it a secret. Right away, a woman who had heard about him came and fell at his feet. Her little girl was possessed by an evil spirit, and she begged him to cast out the demon from her daughter. Since she was a Gentile, born in Syrian Phoenicia, Jesus told her, "First, I should feed the children, my own family, the Jews. It isn't right to take food from the children and throw it to the dogs." She replied, "That's true, Lord, but even the dogs under the table are allowed to eat the scraps from the children's plate." "Good answer," he said. "Now go home, for the demon has left your daughter." And when she arrived home, she found her little girl lying quietly in bed, and the demon was gone. Matthew 15:21 through 28. Then Jesus left Galilee and went north to the region of Tyre and Sidon. A Gentile woman who lived there came to him, pleading, "Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David, for my daughter is possessed by a demon that torments her severely." But Jesus gave her no reply, not even a word. Then his disciples urged him to send her away. "Tell her to go away," they said. "She is bothering us with all of her begging." Then Jesus said to the woman, "I was sent only to help God's lost sheep, the people of Israel." But she came and worshipped him, pleading again, "Lord, help me." Jesus responded, "It isn't right to take food from the children and throw it to the dogs." She replied, "That's true, Lord, but even the dogs are allowed to eat the scraps that fall beneath their master's table." "Dear woman," Jesus said to her, "your faith is great. Your request is granted." And her daughter was instantly healed. Jesus heals a deaf and mute man. Mark 7:31 through 37. Jesus left Tyre and went up to Sidon before going back to the Sea of Galilee and the region of the 10 towns. A deaf man with a speech impediment was brought to him, and the people begged Jesus to lay hands on the man to heal him. Jesus led him away from the crowd so they could be alone. He put his fingers into the man's ears, then, spitting on his own fingers, he touched the man's tongue. Looking up to heaven, he sighed and said something that I can't read. There's a lot of consonants in that word. He said something very important, which means be opened. Instantly, the man could hear perfectly, and his tongue was freed so he could speak plainly. Jesus told the crowd not to tell anyone, but the more he told them not to, the more they spread the news. They were completely amazed and said again and again, everything he does is wonderful. He even makes the deaf to hear and gives speech to those who cannot speak. Jesus heals many people. Matthew 15:29 through 31. Jesus returned to the Sea of Galilee and climbed a hill and sat down. A vast crowd brought him people who were lame, blind, crippled, and those who couldn't speak, and many others. They laid them before Jesus, and he healed them all. The crowds were amazed. Those who hadn't been able to speak were talking. The crippled were made well, and the lame were walking, and the blind could see again, and they praised the God of Israel. Jesus feeds 4,000, Mark 8:1 through 10. About this time, another loud crowd gathered, and the people ran out of food again. Jesus called his disciples and told them, I feel sorry for these people. They have been here with me for 3 days, and they have nothing left to eat. If I send them home hungry, they will faint along the way, for some of them have come a long distance. His disciples replied, How are we supposed to find enough food to feed them out here in the wilderness? Jesus asked, How much bread do you have? 7 loaves, they replied. So Jesus told all the people to sit down on the ground, and then he took the 7 loaves, thanked God for them, and broke them into pieces. He gave them to his disciples, who distributed the bread to the crowd. A few small fish were found, and so Jesus also blessed these and told the disciples to distribute them. They ate as much as they wanted. Afterward, the disciples picked up 7 large baskets of leftover food. There were about 4,000 men in the crowd that day, and Jesus sent them home after they had eaten. Immediately after this, he got into a boat with his disciples and crossed over to the region of Dalmanutha. Matthew 15:32 through 39. Then Jesus called his disciples and told them, I feel sorry for these people. They have been here with me for 3 days, and they have nothing left to eat. I don't want to send them away hungry, or they will faint along the way. The disciples replied, Where could we get enough food here in the wilderness for such a huge crowd? Jesus asked, How much bread do you have? They replied, 7 loaves and a few small fishes. So Jesus told all the people to sit down on the ground. Then he took the 7 loaves and the fishes and thanked God for them and broke them into pieces. He gave them to the disciples, who distributed the food to the crowd. They all ate as much as they wanted. Afterwards, the disciples picked up 7 large baskets of leftover food. There were 4,000 men who were fed that day, in addition to all the women and children. Then Jesus sent the people home, and he got into the boat and crossed over to the region of Magadan. Pharisees demand a miraculous sign. Matthew 6:1 through 4. One day, the Pharisees and Sadducees came to test Jesus, demanding that he show them a miraculous sign from heaven to prove his authority. He replied, You know the saying, red sky at night means fair weather tomorrow. Red sky in the morning means foul weather all day. That's not how it goes. Red sky at night, sailors delight. Red sky morning, sailors take warning. You know how to interpret weather signs in the sky, but you don't know how to interpret the signs of the times. Only an evil, adulterous generation would demand a miraculous sign, but the only sign I will give them is a sign of the prophet Jonah. Then Jesus left them and went away. Mark 8:11 through 13. When the Pharisees heard that Jesus had arrived, they came and started to argue with him. Testing him, they demanded that he show them miraculous signs from heaven to prove his authority. When he heard this, he sighed deeply in his spirit and said, Why do these people keep demanding miraculous signs? I tell you the truth, I will not give this generation any such sign. So he got back into the boat and left them, and he crossed to the other side of the lake. Yeast of the leaders, Mark 8:14 through 21. But the disciples had forgotten to bring any food. They only had 1 loaf of bread with them in the boat. As they were crossing the lake, Jesus warned them, Watch out, beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and of Herod. And at this they began to argue with each other because they hadn't brought any bread. Jesus knew what they were saying. So he said, "Why are you arguing about having no bread? Don't you know or understand even yet? Are your hearts too hard to take it in? You have eyes, can't you see? You have ears, can't you hear? Don't you remember anything at all? When I fed the 5,000 with 5 loaves of bread, how many baskets of leftovers did you pick up afterwards?" 12, they said. "And when I fed 4,000 with 7 loaves, how many large baskets of leftovers did you pick up?" 7, they said. "Don't you understand yet?" he asked them. It is pretty ridiculous that he just fed all those people with just a tiny bit of bread and they're complaining because they only have 1 loaf. Hello, were you there? Matthew 16, 5 through 12. Later, after they crossed to the other side of the lake, the disciples discovered they had forgotten to bring any bread. "Watch out," Jesus warned them, "because beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees." At this, they began to argue with each other because they hadn't brought any bread. Jesus knew what they were saying, so he said, "You have so little faith. Why are you arguing with each other about having no bread? Don't you understand yet? Don't you remember the 5,000 I fed with 5 loaves, and the baskets of leftovers you picked up? Or the 4,000 I fed with 7 loaves, and the large baskets of leftovers you picked up? Why can't you understand that I'm not talking about bread? So again, I say, beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees." Then at last they understood that he wasn't speaking about the yeast in the bread, but about the deceptive teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Okay. Let's do day 29, breaking free from body shame. We are partway through the section titled Accept or Reject on page 75. So we're talking about 3 truths to anchor when misnaming comes your way. And yesterday we said words hold whatever power we give them. Okay, number 2, you may have to remove yourself from the space where the words are spoken. This is a little trickier. Again, there are countless situations wherein this may not be possible. You may be in a long-term relationship with those who don't use their words in God's way. You may be in work situations with those who participate in misnaming, but many of us unwillingly place ourselves in communities where speaking about our bodies negatively is normal and acceptable. In those cases, we are volunteering to belong, but we don't have to. You can walk away from a conversation where anyone's body is being disparaged. You can use your voice to change the conversation. You can choose to no longer surround yourself with people who have such conversations if, after using your voice, they refuse to stop misnaming others. There are many situations wherein we cannot control what is spoken over us and must go to God to help us rename what has been bruised. But often it's as simple as saying, "I no longer belong here." Number 3, we have to remember who we belong to. We won't have the tenacity, boldness, or faith to respond to any of these situations if we don't have a clear, kingdom-minded mentality. Your body is not the world's, but whose is it? We touched a little on this in chapter 2, but let's revisit the basics for emphasis and clarity. Many of us need to shake off disturbed feelings when we talk about belonging to the kingdom and the family of God. So let's remember here that our Father is a kind, good, benevolent King who doesn't need us to do his work or his bidding because he is all-powerful. He doesn't want to dictate what happens in our bodies. He's so pro-freedom, he created us, purchased freedom for us with the cross of Christ, and gave us the opportunity to live and worship and respond to him how we choose. Galatians 5:1, it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm, then do not let yourselves be burdened again by the yoke of slavery. Galatians tells us that God doesn't give us freedom so that we'll love him more or so that we'll do what he wants us to do. God wants our freedom just because freedom is good, and he wants us to have every good thing in abundance through him. Romans 8:28, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Romans tells us that when we belong to God, he is always working out the details of our lives for good. He uses harm for healing. He allows pain to produce something in us. He has our best interest at heart. Belonging to God is nothing like belonging to a human, even the very best human there is, because a human can't love or lead or treat us the way he can. The more time we spend thinking about what it means to be a woman who lives in the kingdom, who is defined and named by her king, the more uncomfortable we'll get with belonging to the world and being labeled by it. The more time we spend learning about our kingdom rights and capacities given to us through the power that raised Jesus Christ from the dead, the less we'll care about meeting the expectations of the world. How do we fight comparison? Breaking the chains and avoiding the traps our culture has placed all around us? We know and speak the truth about who we are, who we belong to, and what that means for our lives. Okay, that's it for today. Pretty quick one today. I took a sip of my coffee by mistake without finishing my water. Gasp. There, mission accomplished. All right. Thank you so much for joining me this morning for devotions. I want to end in a word of prayer. Father in heaven, thank you again for another day on earth, another day, another opportunity to be a way to spread your word, a mission, a tongue-tied mission. Thank you for another opportunity to share you with others and to be a blessing to others and to be a reflection of you. I pray that you will go before us today, whatever we're doing, whether that's work or staying at home or homeschooling or whatever it is. I pray that you will be with us, heal those of us who are not feeling well, who are sick, and give us the strength we need to be a blessing to others. I pray that you will go before us today, especially with our meals, that you will help us through temptation of unhealthy choices, help us to focus on the nourishment and honoring you with our body and with our nutrition and being persistent in our health goals, because we know that is what you want for us. We know that you don't want us feeding our body things that destroy and hurt and break down. Help us to honor our bodies the way you want us to. Thank you for everything you do for us, and go before us today. In your precious name, amen. Okay, guys. Thank you again. I am going to make breakfast. I don't know what I'm going to make. I feel like something carby. I'm probably going to make oats of some kind. Do I know what kind? Absolutely not. I'll figure it out in the next 5 minutes before I go live for breakfast, because that's how I roll. So it'll be a surprise. It's breakfast. I really have no idea. So, all right, guys. I love you all. Have a blessed day, and I will see you back tomorrow.